The American Revolutionary War is one of the most documented events of American history, and we know the Kingdom of France helped the Continental Army to win the independence of the United States. But there is another side to the story where Texas and Spain played an important role in the American War of Independence. When the Revolutionary War began in April of 1775, the Spanish crown was hesitant on backing the rebelling colonists. They feared it would spread revolutionary ideas to their other colonies, such as New Spain, but on the other hand, they generally supported the revolution. They saw the revolution as a chance to deal a decisive blow to the British Empire, to strengthen the northeastern frontier of New Spain, and to regain control of both banks of the Mississippi River and reclaim Florida. This was because the Spanish and British were on opposite sides during the 7 Years' War, and when the British rose victorious from the conflict, European possessions of North America was reconstructed with Britain claiming land from the eastern bank of the Mississippi River to Florida, France losing all of its territories in America, and Spain possessing Louisiana. Spain wouldn't officially begin to support the revolution militarily until 1776, when they began to supply aid to American rebels. Texas at the time was sparsely populated with only 3,000 Spanish citizens and Native American tribes living in the province, with most of the Spaniards living in towns such as San Antonio, Goliad, and Nacogdoches. Going back to the early 1690s, Texas secured a formal place within the Spanish Empire as an official province of the Viceroyalty of New Spain. To support the revolution, Spain made loans to the United States to be used to furnish war supplies through the House of Gordoki, who supplied the revolutionaries with 215 bronze cannon, 30,000 muskets, 30,000 bayonets, 512,314 musket balls, 300,000 pounds of gunpowder, 12,868 grenades, 30,000 uniforms, and 4,000 field tents during the war. It was mostly smuggled through French ports, New Orleans and up the Mississippi River, from warehouses in Havana, and from the Spanish city of Bilbao. Tejanos at the time manned outposts in New Spain to guard Spanish claims in America and reconnoitered neighboring Native American tribes. After 3 years of deciding whether to join the war, finally on July 21st, 1779, Spain officially declared war on Great Britain, entering the Revolutionary War on the side of France and the emerging United States. They would appoint the governor of Louisiana, Bernardo de Galvez, whom Galveston Island is named after, to lead Spanish troops against the British throughout the Mississippi Valley and along the Gulf Coast. Galvez supported the American Rebellion and was also fearful of a British invasion of Louisiana. He had been in communication with many leaders of the revolution, and both him and his uncle José de Galvez had also built up a network of spies that was able to report on British movements in the Gulf. In no time, Galvez assembled an army of 7,000 troops and set his eyes on West Florida. However, he was met with some challenges. Other than the British, Galvez needed a way to feed his troops, and to combat this, he sent an emissary, Francisco Garcia, to Texas with a request to purchase cattle. He asked for this because early in his career, Galvez was stationed in Chihuahua near Texas, and while stationed there, he became aware of the ranches in South Texas and the large herds of cattle that roamed the territory. He therefore wrote to the governor of Texas, Domingo Cabello, requesting cattle to feed his troops and authorizing a cattle drive from Texas to Louisiana. Prior to this, it was illegal for Texans to export cattle to neighboring provinces, so technically, this was the first official Texas cattle drive. The governor would agree upon this, and by August of 1779, 2,000 cattle departed Goliad, beginning the cattle drive. However, throughout the process of raising enough cattle to meet Galvez's demands, Spanish officials encountered numerous obstacles in the process. For starters, by September 20th, 1779, Francisco Garcia had returned to New Orleans, even though Texas officials expected him to take responsibility of the herd. At the same time, concerns regarding the inability of the cattle's exportation from the El Espiritu Santo mission created a delay in the delivery of significant numbers of cattle to Galvez. According to Texas officials, cattle from the mission comprised the major part of the herd that was intended for Louisiana. To counter this, Spanish officials explored alternative routes to round up livestock, including the dispatch of unbranded cattle to Louisiana to make up the difference. There was a much bigger problem, however. Between January and June of 1780, Native Americans, notably the Comanches and Lipan Apaches, began to raid the cattle heads that were being transported to Louisiana. This was notably a thorn in the side for Spanish officials. These raids temporarily delayed any further transportation of the cattle because Tejanos were not interested in risking their lives against the Comanches, and many flat out refused to attend their cattle. However, despite the hostilities with the Native Americans, 10 to 15,000 cattle were driven eastward from Texas to feed Spanish forces engaging the British along the Gulf Coast. Militarily, the Spanish would force the British to fight a three-front war, both in European waters, the 13 colonies in the American Midwest, and in the Gulf Coast, helping the American rebels to be successful in their campaigns. Spain would also regain control of the eastern bank of the Mississippi River, which helped to move needed men, money, and supplies for the rebelling colonists. The Spanish would engage the British in the Gulf Coast from 1779 to 1782 in battles from Bonton Row to the Bahamas, and the most notable of these battles was the siege and capture of Pensacola in 1781, giving Spain control of West Florida. Tejanos would also serve in Galvez's army in his campaigns against British forces, but Texas's support of the revolution did not end there with the cattle herds. Texas raised finances to furnish the war effort, where roughly 1,659 pesos were donated to the United States from among the Texas population. These finances helped to pay for sailors and provisions in Paul de Grasse's French fleet that was pivotal in ending the revolution in America's favor. The Spanish would also assist the Americans in the Siege of Yorktown in 1781, the final major battle of the North American theater. When the dust of the battle settled and British forces surrendered to the Americans, the Revolutionary War had finally, after 8 years, come to an end. The Treaty of Paris would finalize the end of the war, and as a result, Spain would gain control of East and West Florida and Minorca. However, the lands east of the Mississippi were recognized as part of the newly independent United States of America. Spain's role in the American Revolutionary War had a great impact on the freedom of the United States, and even though Texas played a small role in the war with cattle transportation and fundraising, they nonetheless played an important role in the war, and also fought on the side of freedom and liberty before their War of Independence even began. Oh, before I go, remember when I said that the Spanish feared the revolution because it may spread revolutionary ideas to their colonies? Well, that didn't go so well.